All right, we might as well start. My name is Tricia Crowley, and I am president of the Champaign County League of Women Voters, and we'd like to welcome you to our monthly program of timely topics. And there's hardly anything more timely than dealing with misinformation. So I think we're all eagerly looking forward to how we can be more effective handling this. Before we jump into that, I'd like to remind people that we have a couple of upcoming meetings. We have office hours on November 17th at noon to 12:30. It's a quick meeting and it gives you an update on some of the things going on in the league, upcoming programs, observer reports. So you might want to just drop in. And then on December 1st, we're having a program with Jeff D'Alessio, who is editor of the News Gazette. It's going to have a Q&A. It's going to be at noon. You'll get email invites for that program, but he said he was really eager to have a conversation with people. And so you should get your questions prepared and they'll be upcoming. So at this point, I'll turn the meeting over to Karen Fresco, who is head of our task force on this topic and is prepared to inform and educate us. Thank you, Karen.
Right, thanks, Tricia. Just a housekeeping note, we welcome your questions. This is, you don't feel that you're interrupting, please break in. And apparently the most effective way to do that is if you see the chat function at the bottom of your screen, the little bubble with chat under it, if you click on that, you'll have a way to enter your name. And various of us will keep track of that and we'll call on you and then you can ask your question. That's a whole point. We want to hear from you. So please don't be shy. Use the chat, put your name in. This event is being recorded as you were warned when you joined. So that will be eventually the video of it will be posted on the chapter's website. Let me introduce the members of our group who will be presenting this evening. Sarah Kelly, and Ann Prislin, and Mary Ellen Woolner. And now for our topic this evening. We are absolutely bombarded with misinformation about everything, and we're particularly concerned with elections and voting in Illinois. So dead people vote. Foreign countries are sending in mail ballots. Post office employees are dumping mail ballots into ditches. Voting by mail is absolutely rife with fraud. Mail voting gives Democrats an edge. The state sends mail ballots to people who are not eligible to vote. I'm sure you recognize some of these things. This evening, our group, Countering Misinformation About Elections, especially in Illinois, is bringing you some ideas for responding effectively to instances of misinformation that you have been encountering in your everyday life. These techniques are probably most useful in responding in writing on Facebook or other social media, on email, or in a letter to the editor. So let me scope out how we're going to proceed here. The different three parts of our meeting. First, we'll tell you very, very briefly about 3 projects intended to get good information out into the community. And then we'll show you the resources on our group's webpage, especially a list of fact-check sites. And then finally, we'll explain how to make a truth sandwich, which is a clever technique to respond to misinformation effectively. So first to our 3 projects designed to dispense good information on social media and sort of inoculate people against misinformation in the first place. Sarah Kelly will lead off with a project that was her idea.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
We've been hearing a lot about Facebook lately, and sadly, we've come to the realization that it has contributed significantly to spreading false information, which has included our elections, false information about elections. And its influence has really been enormous. So our task force decided to harness the League's reputation for providing nonpartisan, reliable information with the positive power of Facebook. So to do so, we are inviting people who've recently served as election judges to send us a brief statement sharing why they served and what value they see in doing this work. And so far, we have 8 statements, and Karen is going to the Facebook page so you can see one example. And this is from a community member, Barbara Powell. And if you scroll on down, you don't need to do that, Karen, but anyway, there's also one from our own league member, Jenny Putman. So they represent both the Democrat and Republicans. And as you will read, and if you can't read it right now, I encourage you to, you can go to our league website and find this. Jenny and Barbara reflect on the many volunteers in our community who are dedicated to a fair and free election, no matter what political party they represent. And they really reflect on the respect that they show for the election process. In the next few weeks, we're going to be adding additional statements onto our Facebook page. They're going to be saved as a gallery. And then as we get closer to election season, and then during election season, these statements will be reposted. And our hope is that these testimonials, and especially coming from our own community members, will help reassure voters about the integrity of our election process. There are 2 ways that we really could ask for your immediate help. I'm sure many of you have Facebook pages, so if you do, if you could like our posts, forward them to those in your Facebook circle, that would be great. And secondly, if you have served as an election judge or you know someone that has, we would welcome a statement from you or from those that you know have served in this capacity. Do keep in mind, though, that the statements should represent a bipartisan view from both Democrats and Republicans. So that's a quick synopsis of our first activity. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ann Prislin, who will share information about a second activity.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for talking about election judges, because that is sort of a great segue into what I'm going to be talking about. As Karen and Sarah indicated, there is a tremendous lack of information and misinformation related to people's understanding of voting in elections. Some of this is because, quite frankly, elections are not top of mind for everyone all year long. And so many people just are unaware of some of the things that are true about elections in Illinois. But also people hear and see things in the media that might be happening in other states, but are not necessarily happening in Illinois. So what we want to do is share accurate information about elections and about voting through a feature we're calling Ask an Election Judge. Our team is gathering questions and drafting responses based on the Illinois State Election Code, our county clerk's website and staff, and election judge training materials. I'm pleased to tell you that Michelle Jett, the clerk's chief elections deputy, will be working with us. She's reviewing all our draft responses to questions to make sure everything that is said is current and accurate. Here's an example of the kinds of questions we have received. This one actually was asked by a prospective voter when we were registering students at Parkland to vote. And here's the question. Do I have to register to vote for every election? What do y'all think?
No.
Yes, no, maybe. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but the answer is no. However, there are caveats. As long as you're registered to vote at your current address. Interestingly enough, many people do not know that if you've changed your name, even if you haven't changed your address, you need to re-register. And of course, you need to re-register or indicate your current address if you move. We're also going to let people know that if they're unsure if they're registered at your current address or believe your voting status may be inactive, the best place to check is with the county clerk. We're planning to use the Ask an Election Judge feature on social media and on our website for sure, and hopefully other outlets as well. So if any of you have questions about elections or voting, or have heard them from your friends and neighbors, please do send them to Karen we've created quite a long rolling list, but we're welcoming more questions because you just never know what people don't know. So thanks, everybody. And Karen, I'll turn it back to you to talk briefly about our third project.
Yeah, our third project is it's still just on the horizon, but we're going to get to it soon. So we've put together a list of community influencers, and we're going to ask people on this list to record a 15 to 20 second little video on their cell phone. They can hold just head and shoulders of them answering the question, everybody the same question, why is voting important to you? And they'll send that back to us, and then we'll post these individually week by week, and then make a gallery out of them all together, and then we can repost them during the election season, during the 2022 election season. So I want to remind you, if you have questions about any of this, because we're trying to go fast, so to leave time for discussion and questions of what we're presenting, don't forget that chat feature. Don't be shy, put your name in, and we'll let you, we'll pause to get your all important questions. Now, let me show you.
Karen, there is a
Can't hear you.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat from Jean Paley about where the message is, where the election, ask an election judge questions and answers can be found.
Well, you can't find them yet. And why don't you?
That's true. We have just completed editing and vetting our first round of responses to the first 8 questions. And those we need to share with Michelle Jepp. Once that's happened, then we'll start posting them, and we'll certainly let everyone know where they are and how you can access them. Thanks for that question.
Yeah. We need to be very careful about this and get good information out. So we're being very careful about vetting, and we're going to put a source on our answer so that if people also want more detail, they have somewhere they can go to flesh out what we provide. Now, let me show you the resources on our group's webpage. And I have to share my screen to do that. Like this. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I want to show you, we're up in the Facebook part. Okay, here is the welcome page. And where you find us is you go up here and you go under the issues tab and down, and misinformation about our elections. Click on that, and that's where we are. You know, Linda Bear has done a terrific job, and she posts things that I send her. So what you find here, let me get my list so I don't forget to mention, are a bunch of, well, a list of recent events at the university about misinformation. See, now this one was I believe it was the Center for Advanced Studies did this. Local misinformation, small town populist and platform politics. I wanted to highlight that because that's about us. That's about Champaign County. That's about Illinois. That's about Champaign-Urbana as the focus of this talk by Nikki Usher. It was terrific, absolutely terrific. And let's see, this was a segment of a program that WILL ran in their 21st show that runs Monday through Thursday, 9 to 11. There was the last day, they had a 20-minute segment on how can you tell if the news you read is real. So you can access the audio or read the page. This is something Pat Babbage sent me. She saw that the Carter Center had produced a whole report on misinformation in the 2020 election. And you could read this. This is an article that sort of gives you a short overview of what's contained, and also a link to the report itself so that you can break out a chapter and just read for yourself. Another lecture at the Center for Advanced Study about journalism and misinformation. And here now is a series of really nifty graphics that you can download. But I wanted to focus on this middle one. It's from the National League, sent these out. Let me make this bigger. I just wanted to think it provides you a series of steps when you encounter misinformation or what you suspect is misinformation. Just 5 common sense steps. Consider the source, check the date. Sometimes you have things that are trotted out, and when you look at the date, it pertains to something that's years ago. Cross-check the information, see if there are other reputable sources or reputable sources, period, that are reporting the same story. Read past the headline. Headlines are catchy, but if you get into the body of the article, you may find it provides context that just debunks in and of itself. And then question emotionally charged content. I mean, you get these Facebook posts that are rife with capital letters and series of exclamation points. Not a good sign. So let's see, hang on back. So you've got 3 of these. And then a letter to the editor that Mary Ellen Woolner and Prislin drafted and went out. It was published in the paper over Trisha's signature. You can take a look at that if you're looking for excellent models. And here is the main thing I wanted to show you. Paula Kaufman of our group has put together this a curated list of fact-checked sites that are somebody's done. All you need to do is click on it thusly, and then you have a thumbnail description of the site. You know, Paula has looked, just following the steps really of that graphic from the National League that we just walked through quickly. This is what she's done for each of these organizations. Like, is it nonpartisan? Who runs it? Where do they get their money? Who's doing the reporting? Make sure that I have everything here that I want to talk to you about. So let me show you my 2 favorite ones. The first one is Kathleen Hall Jameson's product, and she still keeps up with it. Fact check. Do people know about fact check? Yes, no. I think it's probably one of the most famous ones. She's become quite a figure. Anyway, I just wanted to show you. So you can ask a question like this. This is one reason why I'm doing this. They welcome people to send in questions. They want their team to fact check. But first you want to check if they haven't already covered it. So they've got this debunking false stories page that you can just quickly scroll down and see if your question hasn't already been answered. Quite possible that it has. Or let's see, go back. There's another place that they want you to check first, is viral spiral page. So these kinds of things. See a very, very quick little synopses where you can click for more detail. But if you discover that it is not, your question has not been asked, then you go here, search, and you search for, I'm going to put in something here. I'm not going to ask them to do a fact check on it, but I want to see what in the site has this. And my question was, Democrats benefit from enhanced voter turnout. And it brings up the list of everything they have that pertains to that. And look at this. Sanders, Bernie, during his campaign, apparently, this was a claim that he made repeatedly. So let me just show you the kind of thing that you pull up if you find something. So there, see, it was just during the 2016 campaign, but just to reassuring to see how even-handed they are. They are calling Bernie Sanders out on this. So that introduction, and then here is what, here are his words in the little blue square, what he said, and that he made it repeatedly and in what context. Come on, my scroll bar doesn't work sometimes. And then they cite, you know, they cite newspaper articles, they cite academic articles. They've got wonderful stats. And you go down to the end and they have their conclusion where they debunk the conventional wisdom and give the result. Overall, Sanders' blanket statement isn't supported by data or research on past presidential elections. So that is one of, I just think fact check is easy to use. It's very rich and wonderful to use. I just have been having a really good time, researching it for this little talk. I'm trying to scroll back to the list, to Paula Kaufman's list. The other one I wanted to show you was Politifact. With the description, you just kind of see there's one of these fact check lists is about money in politics. They all have slightly different orientations, different focuses. So here, I think this is fun to use because you kind of get a sense from scrolling quickly, what's out there, what crazy stuff are people claiming, and then their famous, meters here. They're careful articles. I know what I wanted to do was make sure to show you this menu up here. Look at all the stuff they have. So they have stuff about our process. You can suggest a fact check if you want to here. Who pays our staff, promises, Biden's promise tracker. Then you've got a description of their meters, what it means, different kinds of media campaigns. I imagine they'll have 2022 elections when that starts up. But people, issues, they have a whole separate thing for campaigns. But looking here, state editions, Illinois, yes, Illinois, come on, I want to show you what they've got. Now I can't see. Here we go. Okay. So Illinois, Politifact Illinois, does this in partnership with Better Government Association. And here is the scorecard. This, I think, in itself is interesting because it's changed since a week ago. Now, this is 26% of them are mostly false, the ones that they check, and 25% are false. With many fewer people who write in and want stuff fact checked. It generally half true to pants on fire. So you're well recommended to send in your things you want them to check. So here are the most recent ones. I think it's chronologically, but I scrolled down to this one because here is our own Rodney Davis. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office was calling the shots on all of their Capitol security officials' actions on January 6th. So you click on that. It's just an example of an article so that you can kind of see what they give you. So here at the beginning, at the lead, is an abstract. So you can see if you don't have a lot of time or you want to see if you're interested in reading further. Here are the main points of the article. And here are the sources that they used for this fact check debunking. And a lot of them are hot links so that you can go to them and read them for yourself. I think this is just a terrific, terrific resource just for your own information as you read the paper or, you know, deal with what you hear on the radio and what you see on social media. But it's also really, look, they even have the video. They're very careful to give context. So it's not just, here is a statement, one sentence statement by Rodney Davis. When did he speak? In what context? And you can even look for yourself and listen to it, because you can capture tone and the whole, you know, the occasion and Rodney Davis's tone as he participated in this. So it's just, this is just a terrific thing. You might like to know that Kathleen Hall Jameson continues to check. She is working on the ground with the team doing the work on this site. So this is the list of fact check sites, and it is here for you to use. I'm going to scroll back to. Yeah. For you to use to check questionable claims that you see here, to avoid passing on misinformation yourself with a careless click or forwarding or sharing, and to glean reliable facts that you can use in your email or however you want to respond. So, any questions so far? I didn't see that one in my chat, Tricia. So maybe since you're web hosting this, you only see. I just don't want to.
There are no other questions as far as I can tell.
Okie doke, okie doke. Then we can segue into the heart of our program, which is Mary Ellen Woolner, who will explain how to make a truth sandwich. Stop sharing.
All right. Thanks, Karen. Hi, everyone. Let me do a little screen sharing here myself. All right. And you're all seeing that, I presume, the truth sandwich?
Yep.
All right. So this was a phrase that was coined in 2020, probably when misinformation and disinformation were sort of running rampant. So what is a truth sandwich? Well, as a practical and effective method of debunking misinformation, George Lakoff came up with this strategy that he calls the truth sandwich. And some have actually attributed the phrase truth sandwich to CNN's Brian Stelter. So we don't know for sure who came up with it first, but it's a great concept. And this is kind of what it looks like. So you start with the truth. You want the first thing that is stated to be the truth, because that may be the thing that sticks in most people's minds. So the first frame gets that advantage. Then you briefly, emphasis on briefly, indicate the lie. Here you want to really avoid amplifying it, just briefly state it, don't give the lie any more airtime than you absolutely have to. And then as your bottom slice of bread, if you will, I guess you return to the truth. So you repeat the truth again a second time as the bottom of the sandwich. And for those of you who are more visual learners, here is the truth sandwich in graphic form. Again, the truth gets stated first, the lie very briefly gets stated, and then you follow up with probably an expansion of the truth or some additional information that expands upon the truth, the statement that is accurate. So here's an example, and this is an actual example that we took from the New York Times back in January of this year. So with election officials running thousands of local, state, national elections, mistakes, of course, are bound to happen. However, isolated incidents are not evidence of widespread wrongdoing. That's an accurate statement, correct? However, tweets abound about mailing and printing errors that have affected election outcomes. One that's cited in particular was from Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, as an example. But, and again, here you follow up with the accurate, truthful, knowable information. When you look at the facts, Mecklenburg County accidentally sent 2 ballots to roughly 500 voters, just a mistake. Election officials said the mistake was unlikely to lead to double voting as the ballots contained specific codes for each individual voter. So we'll just break it down a little further here. Another example. Drop boxes are secure locations where you can safely submit a completed ballot. And this was a concern, a statement that you may have heard during the 2020 elections, but the concern that when drop boxes are broken into, that no one will know how many ballots were taken. The reality is the drop boxes are put in place by government officials, are frequently under 24-hour surveillance, and that only election officials can access a ballot once it's placed in a drop box. And I think, Karen, didn't you have if you were talking about this with someone, didn't you have an example of where someone actually drove into a drop box with like an armored vehicle or something, and the drop box didn't open? Was that your?
That was Anne's example. Yeah, amazing. Didn't you, Anne? Wasn't that something?
Yes, that's one that I saw, and to my knowledge, it is correct. Because there was a photo of the vehicle, I think it was a Hummer, that had knocked the drop box kind of off its concrete pedestal. And but it was like ours, made of heavy reinforced steel, and survived the encounter with the Hummer just fine.
Right. So just some additional information you certainly could share. Okay, so let's, and I wish I could see you as we're doing this exercise, but unfortunately I can't. So what we're going to do is see if we can sort of construct a truth sandwich here. So the easiest way to start this is was probably to have the piece of misinformation that you hear. So the misinformation in this case, there's widespread evidence that votes are being cast on behalf of dead people and pets. If you were to hear something like that or see something like that in writing, let's say you were tasked with writing an article and this was the misinformation that you wanted to counter. How might you lead into something like this? How might you put your first piece of bread, if you will, on top of this misinformation? Does anybody have and I think I will stop sharing just so we can see each other. Because I know that's sort of awkward where you can only see a few people at a time. Does anybody have and I'll write it down and then I'll go back in and type it into the PowerPoint. Jean, looks like Jean's got a thought.
When you go to a polling place and you are going to vote, they ask for ID. You need to sign your name and they compare it to a signature that they have on file. There is additional information I'm trying to think, and you sign your name.
Okay.
It's very difficult if you're doing it in your neighborhood, and the poll watchers and the people who are running the election very often will know most of the people who come through. It's very difficult to have your pet falsify a ballot.
All right, that's great. Anybody else have a thought about, I mean, I think that would be certainly a statement that you could break into a leading statement, maybe to talk about all of the things that you have to do to verify you are who you say you are when you go to the poll.
And
the
most
polling
of us
place.
have voter ID cards that
Cards.
we can offer.
Yeah. Although my experience has been that they don't
They
ask
don't.
for that.
I've never been asked for mine.
Right.
I've offered it and it has been turned down. They say, we don't need them.
Yes, as a judge in the past, we don't ask for that. I mean, it's part of the law, I think, in Illinois. You could check that with Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, the first thing I might do is go to one of the fact-checking websites so I can get some context for what this misinformation is circulating about, you know.
And there is. I tried, that was one of my test questions. I love it. Apparently, every election, this is brought forth. So it is an old chestnut, and they have a lot of articles on it. You'll find stuff. Dead people vote. That's what you enter.
1960 Kennedy Nixon race, right?
You know, did somebody else have a question or comment?
Well, the joke is always in Illinois is always about Chicago and dead people voting.
Right. Vote early, vote often, vote.
Yeah.
And after.
And I'm from Chicago.
Yeah.
There was a recent case that was on the news, within the last month or two, where a fellow's wife, I don't remember what state it was now, somebody could fill that in, but his wife had passed away. And yes, he did indeed use her name to vote, and then was trying to pass along all this information about how dead people vote. And look at this, somebody voted in my wife's name, and it turned out it was him.
Oh my gosh.
Her husband. So, you know, we know in general it's not widespread, but there are these bizarre instances, and often it's, you know, there's something more to that story that way.
Go ahead, Karen.
It was just something quick. It was another idea. I attended an Indivisible Rural Illinois meeting where they were doing this very same thing, teaching people how to do truth sandwiches. And their idea for the first slice of bread on top was just a general statement that is inclusive, that reaches out rhetorically, reaches out to bridge the distance between you and the person that you're talking to. Something like, it's important to all voters that only those eligible to vote can do so. Then you have your misinformation, the claim that people and pets are voting. And then you could follow with what Jean suggested, how there are things built into the way we process things here in Illinois that assure voter ID, you know, of various sorts.
Jean, go ahead.
One of the things that has happened within the last week was in the Virginia gubernatorial election, if you recall. Youngkin won the election by some, but not much. But his 17-year-old son tried not once, but twice to vote illegally. It was turned away and rebuffed both times. But it seems to me that, and his father was saying, you know, we have to watch out for violations of the security of our voting process. I have no other comment, but you know how I'm thinking.
Jean, you are the master at building truth sandwiches. Every time you speak, you are saying things in a truth sandwich sort of way.
But you know, when we were talking about this technique, we did think that it's probably best suited to a written kind of situation, because it does involve a certain amount of strategizing and thinking of points, of what would go first, what would go third. So that for conversation, you know, if you're across the coffee table from somebody and they say one of these things, maybe there would be a different kind of technique that you could use more effective.
And actually, that's a good point, Karen, because when this concept was first discussed, I mean, it was intended as a way for the media to combat misinformation. So they relied, or they suggested that this format would be an effective way not to give too much airtime to the misinformation, but would still would instead really correct that falsehood. And so it is much easier to put one together, unless you're Jean Paley, much easier to put one together in writing than it would be just kind of off the top of your head. Let me go back and just share a couple more screens here. Let's see, we left off here. Okay, so I think I'm not going to type these out because I think you got the idea, and you did great. Here's the one that I sort of put together just with that same example. So there's widespread evidence that votes are being cast by dead people and pets. For example, this was an actual piece of misinformation that was taken out of context and then amplified and used to mislead. And that was the 846 dead people tried to vote in Michigan's primary. And as I mentioned, so a snippet sometimes of true information occasionally gets taken out of context, is repeated to intentionally mislead. In this particular case, 846 Michiganders died after casting their absentee ballots, but before Election Day, which probably happens in every state all the time.
Yeah, that's good.
So and then we talked a little bit about this a couple minutes ago, but deciding when to use a truth statement. So Jay Rosen, professor of journalism at NYU, says it comes down to a judgment call. So is it consequential? And Kathleen Hall Jameson, if you've read anything by her, her definition of consequential is if the misinformation or the lie is believed, it would have significant consequences. So for example, if you drink bleach, it will cure COVID. Is that consequential? Consequential, absolutely, because if someone hears that, believes it, and then acts upon it, it will have very serious consequences. So that would be an example of something that is considered a consequential piece of misinformation. Would your audience consider the inaccurate claim believable? I think this is about picking your battles, maybe, if it's so far-fetched, do you want to go down that road? I don't know. Can you counter it with certifiable and legitimate truth? Now, this is one where I get tripped up on this all the time, because I know I hear something, I know it's probably not factual, but I can't necessarily off the top of my head counter it with the actual information at my fingertips. I wish I could, but the argument, no it is, yes it is, or no it isn't, yes it is, no it isn't, is certainly a truth sandwich, but it's not a very effective one. So you really need to be able to come up with good factual information. And then lastly, what do you gain or lose by calling out the offender? And that's sort of a personal judgment call. Do you want to, you're going to risk losing a friend over this, and that's always a call that we have to make. So that brings us to questions and discussion, and I will stop sharing so that we can see each other again. And I think Jean had a question or a statement.
Just a statement. And what I'm thinking about is vaccinations for COVID, and the whole notion of or the whole story about hundreds of thousands of people have died from the vaccine. And people who believe that with their heart and soul. I know two of them. And there is nothing that I can say, or probably anybody here can say, that will change anybody's mind. And the best thing you can do is put your mask on and leave.
Yeah. You have to, that's something in the Jameson interview that was circulated with the invitation.
Yes.
Goes into that. I think it's a very cogent point, is to weigh, you know, is this a counter that I want to make? Is it important enough? Is this really an important point to be making? Is this the right avenue? Is this the right circumstance? Oh, there was one thing that kind of I wanted to tag on to what Mary Ellen said there on her last slide. This comes from the League. They said, do not mention the name or personalize the misinformation piece of the truth sandwich. Have it be as bland, as neutral and short as possible, because you just enhance its play if you associate it with particularly a prominent person who's been, you know, like Tucker Carlson or something. You don't want to say Tucker Carlson said, just leave Tucker Carlson out of it and go to the misinformation as bland as you can make it.
Tricia.
You know, I think the point that Karen, you mentioned was made in the Indivisible Rural meeting, to try and make your first statement reach out to the audience that might be listening to the misinformation. And that's, you know, sort of hard to do off the top of your head, but you know, if you start in a yes it is, no it isn't discussion, you're not going to get that far, even if you say I fact check this, you know.
You can kind of practice some. I thought of another similar thing for the idea of processing of mail ballots, you know, that they're squirrely and you're delegitimizing the election because you can't assure the chain of custody for mail ballots that are dropped in drop boxes and PO boxes. If you started off with something like this, all of us can agree that security in the processing of mail ballots has to be assured. Maybe that was just, you know, a first draft. But then you could go, you know, but people are, it has been, I love the passive voice here to kind of depersonalize it. I was particularly thinking of that letter to the editor, that one that Mary Ellen and Anne collaborated in writing and that you signed off on, Tricia. That was what I was thinking about with this. I'd be curious, what kind of misinformation have people been running into? Just wherever, from family and friends, on the radio, News Gazette letters to the editor, Facebook.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation about COVID, certainly.
Sure.
Yeah, and in vaccines.
We were trying to focus, you know, we were trying to stay away from COVID because it's a whole phenomenon unto itself as far as emotional. And anyway, we were focusing on voting and elections, but there's a lot out there too. I mean, Anne, you had that friend of yours who was just musing about the possibility of double voting that vote by mail presents. To talk about that, I thought that was such an interesting.
Yes, a friend of mine, maybe a year or so ago, had been thinking, and he posed a question to me, and he said, suppose my son has a mail ballot and drops it in the, you know, fills it out, drops it in the box, and then quick like a bunny runs over to his local polling place and wants to vote. What's going to stop that? And I immediately thought, well, he won't be able to, but I couldn't explain how and why. So I had to look it up. I actually had to read sections of the election code which I recommend if any of you have trouble sleeping. It's really a very good document to read. But there is a very significant way that every election authority makes sure that that does not happen. And it's part of the election, the voter rolls and the computer system that's used in elections now. So I was able to give him a really good answer with a lot of information from reliable sources. And he said, oh, thank you. So, but I did have to take some time because I wasn't sure. So I think, Tricia, you had made the point very early on that before thinking about how to maybe counter misinformation, do a little checking yourself, right? To see what the true story is, and also maybe where this misinformation is coming from, the way Mary Ellen did with that thing about the dead voters in Michigan, to find out what the context was for that. So I think pausing and thinking about what it is I want to communicate about this and am I correct is really part of our process.
I just add one, sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. I just again wanted to mention, so for the 2020 election, I took the judge training. I mean, I've done the in-person judging, but this was all handled remotely by the clerk. And although I didn't actually participate because all the slots were filled before I was able to sign up for anything, part of the training, just to go back to the issue of the security and so forth of remote voting, of mail-in voting. I mean, one thing that just has struck me, and maybe you've covered this in other meetings, is that your average person who hasn't participated in the judging process, and most people haven't, they just aren't aware of the process and that there are processes that are followed. And I don't think there's too many issues, at least not in Champaign, that I'm aware of, where the process isn't followed. So, just one case in point is, maybe you already know this, but for the cleaning out the drop boxes, there were always two people who had to meet there, and they were always from opposite parties. And they had to go, I believe it was in separate cars. One person put the ballots that they pulled out of the drop box in their car, and the other person followed them back to, the drop-off point, back to headquarters. So there was a chain of custody that was signed off on, and that was followed to my knowledge, although, I personally didn't do any of those myself. But so there were checks and balances. And my point is just that I think that the more people can understand about the processes involved in election day and early voting and mail-in would go a long way. So somebody like Michelle Jett, who's often the trainer in these situations, is in a very good place to share that information.
I'm sorry, is this Ruth speaking?
Yes.
So Ruth,
Yeah.
have you submitted a statement? And if
No. Yeah.
would you be willing to?
I'm willing to. I have some other issues. I have
that's
issues
okay.
with Facebook, and I don't want to talk about that right now.
Okay, I
so
get
I don't
that.
use
So
Facebook,
I'm
but I'm
sorry to put-
happy to. Yeah.
I'm
Sure.
sorry to put you on the spot, but
Yeah, I should. I probably should. I hadn't really thought about what I would say, but yeah.
no pressure. I was just looking to see. I didn't know if you'd submitted something.
I didn't, but thanks for asking.
If you would consider, that's fine. And if you decide not to, no pressure.
I will. I'll put something together. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I'd just like to mention, I think it was Karen that just suggested that, and others too, that if we do find ourselves in conversation and somebody does make a statement about elections, I think starting out and saying that we all care about the same thing, which is the integrity of our voting process. And
Yeah.
that is just such a great way to disarm people and to show that we have that in common.
Yes.
And I just think we'll find people much more willing to, if there is some additional information you could share, they would be much more willing, I think, to receive it if they know that you're both have a common concern. And I think that's, in my opinion, one of the problems right now is that people are only looking at what divides us. And the reality is, and at least with elections, I think we all hopefully want the same thing. Maybe we have different, methods about going about it, for sure. But anyway, I just really support that idea of, if it's possible, to find a commonality before we start giving that fact, before we present the facts. I think that'll go a long ways.
Yeah.
I actually have a question. Would the league consider asking one of the people who trains election judges to do an office hours or something like this before an election and tape it so that it could be played on more than one occasion? Because that would really, that would educate people, and I think make them understand what the process is actually like from the time somebody walks into a polling place until they leave.
Taking the election training is really fun. It's the best way I know to really learn about how the elections really go. What I think I remember about a mail-in ballot and then wanting to vote, what I remember hearing in training was, if you were mailed a ballot and they have it on their list to show that the number was the number of the election that was sent to you, to vote in person, you have to bring in your unused mail-in ballot
That is
and
right.
turn it in, and then you get to vote. And the second thing is, the way I remember a truth sandwich is, first you start with something that you have in common. Second, you address the problem. And third, you finish with something you have in common, because people who like you are more likely to understand and agree with you than if you get in a very confrontational mode.
That's excellent. Thank you for that. That's very good.
Can you address or talk about a little bit more about when it's worthwhile to do this? This isn't something that's suggested for the Facebook postings, of which you maybe have 5 a day that are wrong or something like that. It's presumably more either some written letter to the editor or conversations with people or something like that. Just when do you think this is going to come up?
Oh, when?
Yeah.
Well, I just think it's going to come up more and more as we get into the primary and then the election season. It's just going to intensify. So it's really good to have thought about these things and get our toolkits in order so that we have different ways of responding in different situations. But I thought one of the interesting things in that interview with Kathleen Hall Jameson was the question of judgment. And when do you choose to respond? And I remembered, I reread that article this afternoon, so I think it's clear in my mind that one criterion that was important was, would people act on this? Is it just something that people are saying? Is people say a lot of crazy things? But if it's something that can, well, maybe the bleach is such a vivid example. That people drank bleach. There are people who died in Florida, right? But I'm trying to think, team, of an example in election and voting where it's going to have an impact. I mean, people are not going to vote. They're going to stay home. All of this crazy stuff going on, why do it? That's
actually an election tactic. is to demoralize the other side.
Yes, yes. I don't know. Y'all, is there an instance that you would consider to be frivolous and really not worth, not draw attention to it by giving it a response? Things have gotten so crazy, it's sort of hard to think. Is there anything too crazy, too frivolous, really just silly stuff that you just let it pass?
Yeah, I think, so I was working with the Forest Preserve District. We went to referendum in 2020, in November of 2020. And we had to decide, if somebody posted something on Facebook, for example, and it was misinformation, we had to decide how were people likely to believe it. So again, what you're saying, Karen, and you do take the risk of, but if it was a serious piece of misinformation, we did go ahead and respond in the same format where the misinformation was posted. So we would post on Facebook if it was a comment made on Facebook, and very briefly just clear up, no, this is not true. The, taxing percentage is not this, it's really this, very no emotion tied to it, just clear it up quickly and be done with it. But it is, every time you see a piece, you have to make that judgment call, I think.
Yeah. And that wasn't a truth sandwich. It was just setting the record straight as quickly and have it be
Right.
not let a whole lot of time go by.
And, in most of those cases, a truth sandwich probably would have been overkill.
Yeah.
It was easier to clear up just in a sentence.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think where the judgment comes in for me is, does the person really want information? Or are they just trying to,
Get their 15 seconds of,
right.
right.
And sometimes you can tell that. Sometimes you can't. It's kind of good to have a group of people who are all concerned about the same thing. You could kind of show somebody and say, what do you think?
Mhm.
Would you dignify this with a response, or should it just let it go, or maybe see how many shares and likes it gets? And I'm not a Facebook person. I just do it for the league and politics.
I lurk.
Yeah, it's just not I don't see the point. It does not speak to me. Facebook does not.
So we have gone a little bit past 8 o'clock. Do you want to round up?
Sure. And call on the team members who collaborated on this effort to jump in. I wanted to say that Mary Ellen's PowerPoint will be uploaded to our group's page so that you can have access to it. And we'd be glad to send around an email when that's available, if people would like that, or you just kind of in a week or so. Linda's awfully good about getting that stuff up. So there will be the PowerPoint available, and then the video recording of this meeting also available on the YouTube site, right, Tricia?
Right.
That's where you go down to the YouTube area. And could I please again, if any misinformation occurs to you, shoot it to me, KarenFresco1@gmail.com, and we'll work it into a Q&A. The Ask an Election Judge. We'll see if we can do something with it instead of just have it drive you nuts. Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure to share our ideas and to hear from you about all of this. And we look forward to
Just one last thing. I know that your team is an ongoing project. What kinds of Are you still looking for new members? You want some volunteers, and what could more volunteers do with your?
Absolutely. That's why we introduced our 3 projects. So Facebook project, it's really a question of finding people who have trained and served as election judges and contacting them and extracting a short affirmative statement. Contacting people or thinking of people and giving us the contact information. Ask an election judge about voting in elections in Illinois. We want your questions. If you are interested in researching answers and editing answers down to, a good size, contact me. We have lots of work that can be done that way. And certainly when we start up the YouTube project, people submitting their answers to why voting is important to me. We'll need people to contact, I think it'll work best if you know somebody among this list of influencers and you already have that entree, you can call and ask if they do something for us.
Well, I really want to thank the people that are involved, because it's such, it's a national issue, but it has local consequences and it can be acted on locally, which is really, which means that we have to do that. So thank you very much.
Oh, pleasure.
Jenny has a question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say I was floored when I received a note from Clerk Ammons that he had read the statement and said, thank you very much. That was very kind of Aaron Ammons to send that note. And I want to say that the group who worked together mostly throughout the month of October, about 4 or 5 hours a day from October through election day, and the esprit de corps developed. We bonded. Some were R's, some were D's. It was known that we needed an R and a D for certain tasks, and people just enjoyed one another's company. It was a thrill, and I really want to work again as an election judge. And thank you for giving us this opportunity.
Well, thank you for getting us a terrific first statement, Jenny.
I think it was 3 pages long and needed to be edited to 3 sentences. It makes my heart pound. I'm my mother's daughter. My mom brought me up to be this way.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
And if you want to watch it again, it'll show up on YouTube. Thanks.
Thanks, Tricia.